Today I'm going to teach you how to make a spring snare trap to catch small game if you're ever in a dire situation. So pay attention, gang. This could save your life one day. If you're not familiar with a spring snare, it's a trap that you can use to catch very small game like rodents, squirrels, rabbits, even birds. The way it works is you use a snare, which is a noose-like rope that you can make from twine or any type of cordage that you can get, and that is attached to a trigger mechanism that is then attached to a spring mechanism. So the idea is that you bait this, the animal walks in to get the food and ends up tugging on the snare, which releases the trigger, allows the spring to go up, which captures the animal in the snare, and then hopefully it'll still be there when you come back to check your trap. Now, these are very useful traps because they're passive traps and you don't have to be there to make them work. So you set this up and you walk away and wait for the animal to come and spring it. The more of these traps you can set, of course, the higher chances you're going to have of actually catching an animal and scoring that necessary protein that you're going to need to make it to your next day and ultimately your rescue. So you're only going to need a few basic items to create this trap, most of which you should be able to find in nature wherever you're at. So the first thing you're going to need is an anchor stick. So I found this stick here. I'm going to sharpen the end and then drive this thing deep into the ground so that it is very solid and won't let go. The next thing you're going to need is a trigger stick. I found this stick. Looks like something's been gnawing on it already, but this is a good size, as you can see, for a trigger. And what we're going to do is create notches in these so that they will hold each other together. Well, the next thing you're going to need, of course, is a knife. This little survival knife that I've got right here. So you're going to need that, and the only other thing you're going to need is some sort of cordage. So today I'm just going to use this twine that I've got just to demonstrate how it works. If you don't have any cordage, I'll make you some later videos to show you how you can create cordage using natural materials that'll achieve basically the same thing. The best possible thing that you could have to make this work would be some baling wire or something really strong so that when your animal is trapped, it'll be a lot harder to chew through the wire than it would a string or some type of cordage. If you don't have the baling wire, it can still work without it. We're going to match them up about like this, and I'm going to create two notches in these. Mark that spot right there. So I'm just going to get my knife and I'm just going to start kind of making a mark here. And what I want to do is have it go in, possibly slightly up a little bit. You don't want it to be too much because you do want it to be a hair trigger, so to speak. No pun intended. And then you want this to slope up towards it, sort of like this. So this can take a few minutes to play around with, but the more defined you get that trigger, the better it'll work. So as you can see here, I've just been whittling on this for maybe 5-10 minutes, and I've started to create a shape that looks something like this. You want it to be enough to grab your trigger stick, but you don't want it to be too good, because you do want that trigger stick to be like a hair trigger to where when something barely touches it, it's going to lose its grip and come off. So if it's too good, then your animal could end up getting in and out of the trap and not triggering it. So just keep that in mind. Now I'm going to go ahead and start working on the trigger stick so that it will fit into this groove and hold there. So I'm going to start whittling on this, and then once I have them both, I can fit them together and see how they fit, and if I need to, I can refine it from there. And mark it with my knife. So in this situation, I want to go backwards because I want my flat edge to be here and then slope up. So in this case, I've got the flat part marked with a good cut, and then I'm just going to start whittling it out like this. And basically do the same thing that we did on the anchor stick, except in reverse. All right, so once you've got your grooves cut, your anchor stick should look something like this. And as you can see, it is far from perfect. Perfection is not necessarily a good thing here. And then my trigger stick looks something like this. They're basically the opposites. And they are just good enough that I can kind of hang one from the other. And I can just barely do that. If I move much, it's going to fall. And that's what you want. You want it to be real sensitive. So the next thing we need to do after you've got this is go ahead and tie on your cordage. Now, as far as how much cordage you need, it may depend on the location that you're setting up your trap. I'm going to start with one end, and I'm going to tie a very small little, I guess you could say a little slip knot, just a tiny little loop here like this. And then you can just take another loop and push it right through like this, and that will create your snare. Like this. So it's sort of like a little self-tightening loop. The harder you pull on it, the tighter it gets. So I'm thinking about like this. And then we want to take this, tie that off to our trigger stick. Now, one thing you're going to want to do before you tie this on is create a small notch in the trigger stick with your knife, and that will help prevent your cordage from slipping off. It's not going to take much. Put a little notch in it, kind of like that. There's the snare. And I'm just going to take this and create a loop, pass this through the loop, and then put that on there and tighten it down. And make sure that string goes through the groove that you made, and that'll keep it from slipping off. Now you can pull this tight, get it in your groove, pull it tight. You're going to want to do that one more time to make sure that it doesn't come off. Once I've got that wrapped around a couple times and it's good and tight, I'm going to go ahead and just pull off a fair amount, cut it off. And then I'm going to tie this in just a regular knot. That's a pretty tight knot right there. That's tight, so I can pull this nice and tight. You don't want that to slip off. And this is nice and tight, like that. Now, we're ready to set the trap. Okay, so now that we've got all our pieces set the way we want, you want to find a spot where you think some small game might be traveling. What I'm looking for is something to use as a spring mechanism. I'm thinking this branch might work really well. You're going to want to be at pretty much above where your trap is going to be. So I'm going to say right about here. This is my anchor. So I'm just going to put my anchor in right about here. Found me a little piece of wood. Just going to hammer it in. And you just want to get that in tight enough to where it's going to hold itself and not be real easy to pull back out. And I think that might be good enough. This is going to be your snare. And we're probably going to want to set this up right over in here. And then this is your trigger. It's going to go right under here like this. So what I'm going to do is find about how much tension I want on this. It's going to be down about right there. So that's about where I'm going to want to tie it. And I'm just going to use just a basic little slip knot. It doesn't matter what kind of knot you use, just as long as it's good and tight and it's not going to come loose. So now I've got that tension on the line. We'll just bring that down like this. And that's where you're going to set that, like that. And you just want to set this somewhere where a little animal might be coming across here. And if you've got little sticks or natural stuff like this, You can use it to sort of hold it in place. Something like that. And then you take a little piece of food or something and put it right in here. Like that. So when your little animal comes across and he wants to grab it, then he'll get caught up in this thing, and when he tries to leave, he'll spring that up and get caught in your snare.
Hoo-wee!
Hopefully he's still there when you get back.
Did it grab your hand?
Yeah.
Sure did.
So that's your simple spring snare.
Do you call that the triple S?
The triple S.
The simple spring snare?
The simple spring snare. This is a real old technique, man. I'm sure this thing's been in use for millions of years.
Oh, we didn't just develop this at BeastMode Labs?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Can't take credit for that one. But yeah, real easy to make and real effective. You put just a little bit, they try to get off with that, and boom.